In whispers, in glances, in what they didn't say. My sister? The golden one. Military star. Dad's favorite. Mom's mirror. And me? I fixed cars. Took night classes. Started a business they never asked about. No medals. No applause. Just grease under my nails and peace in my solitude. Until the day of her promotion ceremony. I went because I was invited by mistake. My sister assumed I wouldn't show. Or maybe she wanted the satisfaction of watching me sit quietly in the back, beneath their polished uniforms and smug champagne. The room was stiff with ego. Rows of press collars, badges shining like they'd never been touched by dirt. My father ignored me. My mother offered a plastic smile. Before leaning to someone and whispering, he always struggled. Never quite rose to the occasion. I sat, silent, not small, just done. The ceremony started. They introduced ranks, called out names, and my sister beamed. Then he walked in, her base commander. Tall, decorated, gravitas like thunder in dress blues. He scanned the room, paused. Then his eyes landed on me. Locked. Unmoving. He walked over, each step louder than the last, and said, "Sir, may I get a photo with you?" The room stopped breathing. Even the air froze. My father blinked. My sister's hand dropped mid-salute. Mom's glass trembled. "I don't mean to cause a scene," the commander said, "but I read your article in Veteran Leadership Weekly. Your story changed how I lead my men." He turned to the photographer. "Get this man in frame. This is what real resilience looks like." The click of the camera shutter was louder than applause. And my family? They just stood there, mouths half open, realizing too late the failure child was the man they all wanted to be. My name is James Walker, and from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is just being seen by someone who truly knows your worth. The photo made it to the base website. Front page. My name's spelled right. No middle initial. No asterisk. Just. Local veteran and entrepreneur inspires new leadership model. I didn't post it. Didn't gloat. Didn't tag a soul. But my phone started buzzing like it owed someone money. First came the text. From my dad. "Didn't know you were involved with base leadership. Proud of you, son." From my mom. "Saw your name online. Looks like things are going well." And finally, from my sister. That was unexpected. "Can we talk?" Talk? She hadn't talked to me in years. Only sent invites out of obligation. Introduced me at functions as, "Oh, this is just my older brother. He does stuff with cars." They never asked about the program I built. The one that trained ex-Marines to become certified mechanics, giving them tools, work, and most importantly, purpose. They didn't know I'd spoken at the Pentagon last spring. Didn't know I'd been nominated for a national award. Didn't know because they never cared to ask. Until someone with more medals than them shook my hand and said, "You taught me what leadership really is." That night, I went home, sat on the worn couch in my quiet shop office, and looked at the photo. Me in a plain button-down. Him in full uniform. But the respect? Undeniable. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small in my family's shadow. I realized they had been standing in mine. Because the measure of a man isn't who claps for him. It's what echoes in the silence. After they stop. And suddenly, the silence from them? It didn't sting anymore. It just proved what I always knew. I never needed their validation to be somebody. But now that the world saw me, they were the ones desperate to pull me back in. They wanted a reunion? They'd get one. But not on their terms. Not in their language. And not with their rules. I wasn't their shame anymore. I was the reminder that they misjudged the one man who never stopped showing up, even when they erased him from every photo. 2 days later, my sister called. I didn't pick up. She tried again. Then texted. "We're throwing a small dinner to celebrate my promotion. It would mean a lot if you came. Everyone's asking about you now." Not "I'm sorry." Not "I was wrong." Just, "They're asking about you now." Now. Not back when she laughed at my busted hands. Not when she told our cousins I dropped out of everything. Not when she joked. James? Oh, he fixes oil leaks and ego leaks. Guess one paid off. But now, that her commander wanted a photo. Now, that I had a name people whispered with respect. I stared at the message, then replied, "Sure. I'll come." Because I wanted to see it. The moment truth stood next to arrogance. And watched it shrink. I arrived late. On purpose. The dinner was in a private room at a downtown hotel. Dim chandeliers. Polished silver. Everything fake. Except for the way my dad nearly dropped his wine glass. When I walked in, suddenly, I was someone again. Suddenly, they were proud. "There he is," my father said too loud. "The man of the hour." Mom kissed my cheek like we hadn't gone silent for a year. Even my sister smiled, stiff and glossy. "Glad you could make it, James." I took a seat. Didn't say much. Just listened. Then the commander walked in. The room stood. And he made a beeline. Not to my sister. To me. "James," he said, "I told HQ about your training center. We'd love to send some of our guys through it post-discharge. You're building something real." Every eye turned. Every plate paused mid-bite. Even my sister blinked too fast. And then, with no effort, he dropped the line that shattered them. "You should have told me your brother was the James Walker. Man's practically a legend." Silence. I looked at my sister. She couldn't hide it. The storm behind her teeth. The realization that the shadow she tried to bury had grown roots, had bloomed. And now, he was standing at her table. I raised my glass. Not out of pettiness. Out of peace. "To unexpected reunions," I said. "And the truth, it always arrives. Even if it's late." After that night, the calls didn't stop. Suddenly, I was important. Not because they remembered my sacrifices, but because others had. My dad invited me to golf. He hates golf. Mom asked if I'd come over for Sunday dinner, just like old times. There were no old times. Only obligations I used to mistake for love. And my sister? She texted me a photo of us as kids, with a single line. "We were close once. Let's try again." I stared at it. The irony. All my life, I sat at the table they built. Quiet, compliant, invisible. Pretending it was home. Now suddenly I was welcome. Now they wanted to rewrite the past. Because the present didn't serve their pride anymore. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to my shop the next morning. And opened early. I had 4 vets waiting. One just out of rehab. One who hadn't held a wrench in 10 years. One who showed up because I paid for his bus ride across state lines. And one kid who just needed someone to tell him he wasn't broken. We talked. Worked. Laughed like we'd known each other for years. No uniforms. No ranks. Just men building something real. With their hands and their pain. At lunch, I checked my phone. My sister had posted a photo. Her with the commander. Me tagged. The caption? "Proud of my big brother. My silent rock. Always leading in his own way." Silent rock? She had buried me alive for years. Now that I was trending in their world, she wanted to hold the thread. Like, she'd sew me into her story. I untagged myself. No announcement. Just a quiet boundary. Because I'm not your plot twist. Not your redemption arc. Not the failure child you get to reframe. Now that I survived your silence. That day, I etched a new sign outside my shop. Walker and Sons. Built from grit, not permission. And I meant it. I no longer needed a seat at their table. Because I'd built my own. Stronger. Wider. One where no one had to shrink to stay. I got a call from my cousin Nate that weekend. He never calls. Always kept out of the mess. But his voice was tight, cautious. "James, just wanted to give you a heads up. Your parents are throwing a party next month. Word is, you're the guest of honor." I blinked. I didn't agree to that. He sighed. "I figured. But they're telling people you're flying in. That you'll give a speech. That the family's close again." Close? They hadn't even called when I was in the hospital 6 years ago. After a service injury nearly took my leg. Didn't visit. Didn't text. Just posted praying hands under an article and moved on. Now, they wanted me to play the prodigal son. Because it looked good in a room full of donors. Because I was finally a story worth attaching to.
I didn't get mad.
Not anymore. That part of me? Long buried. I just booked a speaking gig the same night. At a high school 200 miles away, talking to teens who'd aged out of foster care. People who actually listened. Who didn't care what medals I wore. Just that I showed up and didn't leave. The night of their party, my sister sent a selfie from the ballroom. Everyone's asking about you. You sure you're not coming? I replied. Hope it goes well. I've got people who actually need me tonight. No emoji.
No stuff.
Just that. Later, I saw a post on her story. The room, dimly lit. My dad giving a toast. Captioned, family is everything. And that's when I knew they were mourning something they never truly valued.
Me.
Not the version of me they created in their heads. Not the wounded mechanic. Or the quiet disappointment.
Me.
The one they didn't believe in.
Didn't invest in.
Didn't invite until someone else validated him. And now that I wouldn't show up for their narrative, they had to fill the space. With fake smiles and hollow words. But the truth? It echoed louder without me there. Because absence isn't silence. It's a mirror. And that night, they were finally forced to look in it. 2 weeks passed. Then came the article. Not from me. From the base's media division. A full spread on veteran-led rehabilitation centers. The headline? From Discharge to Destiny. How James Walker is rewriting the future for veterans. Photos.
Quotes.
Stories from men I trained, who now had their own shops. It hit national syndication by morning. News anchors said my name. Commenters called me the kind of man this country forgets, then worships too late. And suddenly, I wasn't just a brother. I was a movement. I didn't even know until my inbox flooded. Partnership offers. Speaking engagements. A senator's aide asking if I'd attend a bill signing. I said yes to the last one. Because if I could change even one policy that stopped treating broken soldiers like scrap, I'd do it 100 times. But what really landed was the message from my mom.
Short.
And painfully familiar. Why didn't you tell us this was happening? We could have supported you. You're making us look like strangers. I stared at it. And then I laughed. A real, full laugh. The kind that starts in your gut. And doesn't ask permission. Because strangers? They were kinder than she ever was. Strangers didn't call me embarrassing behind closed doors. Didn't say, not everyone can be like your sister, James. I wrote back, you never supported what you couldn't control. I built this without you. So don't act like you held the hammer. No reply. Later, I got a screenshot from a mutual friend. My sister had posted again. This time with a side-by-side photo of us. Captioned, proud to be related to someone who's finally using his potential. Finally. Like my worth had been on layaway. Like her praise was the final stamp of approval. I messaged her once. You don't get to rewrite my story now that it's profitable. Then I blocked her. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. Because when the story is no longer theirs to spin, they panic. They scramble. They cling to the pieces they once threw away. But I'm not a piece anymore. I'm the whole damn blueprint. And they're not invited to this build. The senator shook my hand. Firm grip. Direct eye contact. We need more men like you, Mr. Walker. The cameras clicked. The press smiled. But all I could think about was how not one of my family members had even texted congratulations. They'd gone quiet. But not because they were proud in silence. Because they weren't part of the photo this time. And that meant they couldn't use it. At dinner after the event, I sat across from a young vet, with burns down his arm and tears in his throat. They said I wasn't leadership material, he told me. But you taught me I was worth rebuilding. I nodded. Not just for him. For myself. Because every time I poured into these men, I reclaimed a little piece of the boy they ignored.
Meanwhile,
my parents were scrambling. They'd been trying to get in touch with the article's editor. asking if they could submit a family piece to show where I came from,
As if they built me.
as if proximity meant pride. But the editor forwarded me the request, and I replied myself, respectfully decline. My story speaks loudest without their commentary. A week later, my aunt called, said my mom wasn't eating, that my dad had been sulking. They just want to see you again. They're hurting James. I took a breath, then asked, did they ever feel hurt when they left me out of every celebration? When they called me a disappointment behind closed doors? When they built my sister's image with bricks from my silence? She didn't answer, just sighed. Maybe they didn't know better. But I do. And knowing better means doing better, even if it means walking alone. Especially when walking alone is what finally sets you free. I closed the call, sat at my desk, and opened the latest blueprint for the new training center I was building in Phoenix, fully funded, by my own hands, in my own name. No one could erase me now. No one could claim my roots. After chopping down the tree for years, they wanted me to be a footnote. Instead, I became the headline. It was raining the day I got the call. Not from family, not from media, from a soldier, one of the first I ever trained, now head of his own garage. He said, "You've got to come down, James. The plaque's going up today." I almost didn't go, but something pulled me. Not ego, not nostalgia, just closure. The garage was full. Veterans from 5 different states.
Wives. Kids.
Men with scars you could see, and some you couldn't. On the far wall, a polished plaque, bolted into steel. The James Walker Training Hall, for those told they'd never matter. I couldn't speak for a second, because that line was everything I'd ever needed to hear. And no one in my family ever said it. So I said it to every man who came through that door. We cut the ribbon. The cheers were real. The tears even more so. Later that night, I sat in the quiet of my truck. No cameras, no family, just the sound of rain, tapping out a rhythm that felt like peace. Then came the final message. My dad. Your mother and I saw the article in the Times. You've done well, maybe too well. Either way, you've proven your point. Proven my point? Like my entire life was a debate. I'd finally won by accident.
I didn't reply.
Just blocked the number. For good. Because this wasn't about proving anything. It was about surviving everything. And still choosing to build. I looked at my hands, the same hands they once said were meant for manual labor. They were right, but they forgot. Hands that build also hold. Hands that hold also heal. And mine? They did all 3. I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the foundation. The storm that didn't just pass, but rebuilt the town after. Let them tell stories. Let them twist the timeline. I'm not theirs to edit anymore. I'm the man who made peace louder than applause. Who walked away and kept walking. Until the only thing behind him was silence that no longer hurt. And ahead, a line of men who now believe in themselves. Because I once stood alone. And didn't fold. This was never revenge. This was resurrection.